Hello, I'm Michael Pierce, and this is The Human Condition. Today, our topic is how to correctly eat to improve mental health. There are some things that you need to have in your body that are necessary for the substrate of your brain to provide mental health for you. If you go to a counselor and you try to improve your psychology and your mind and your outlook on life, you've got to have a good firing brain to be able to do that. And so that means you can't be full of sugar and you can't be deficient in protein or fat and minerals. If you're going to try to improve your brain function, you have to have good chemistry underlying your psychology. So my job is to do just that. I work with psychologists and counselors and psychiatrists to help with mental health by understanding the chemistry and the electricity of the brain and the wiring of the brain. I don't do the counseling part. One of the most important things for a healthy brain is trace minerals. If you don't have trace minerals, you can't have a good brain. You require trace minerals to make all of the B vitamins operate, as well as almost every enzyme system in the body depends on things like magnesium and zinc and other minerals and metals. The ones that are most important for mental health really seem to be magnesium and lithium and rubidium. These are important for the work regarding B12 and vitamin B12 and how vitamin B12 interacts with folates and how vitamin B12 works in your body to control your energy production and your ability to turn over DNA. So if you've got a problem with minerals, with mineral deficiency, you might not do very well with your brain and your psychology. Likewise, if you have heavy metals, if you've got a lot of heavy metals, we look for them in your hair usually for chronic exposure. Heavy metals tend to poison your enzymes throughout your body and your brain. So you end up with not following the rules of nutrition and not following the rules of chemistry. And in fact, these patients end up taking drugs from their psychiatrist and they don't respond normally. And one of the reasons and there's many reasons, but one of the reasons they might not respond normally is because they've got heavy metal poisoning. Heavy metal poisoning will make your chemistry unpredictable. And so you won't respond well to TMS or transcranial magnetic stimulation or counseling or EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and repatterning. It might be that you don't respond well to drugs or medications or neurofeedback. None of the therapies that we do to the brain will be predictable, and the brain will not respond well to supplements, to foods, to really any intervention that we do if you're poisoned. So it's important to identify if you've got heavy metal toxicity, pesticide toxicity, and things like that. So what can you eat? Well, one of the best ways to get trace minerals is to make a bone broth, is to eat freeze-dried organ meat pills or eat organ meats if you can. Those are usually reasonably high in minerals. And to be able to eat nose to tail is the idea if you're eating carnivores, to eat nose to tail, which means try to eat more than just steaks because skeletal muscle doesn't have the same mineral content and vitamin content that other parts of the animal have. If you're not eating meat and you're some type of vegetarian, there are ways to get minerals from brewer's yeast and from other types of very good soil. And you have to pay a lot of attention to the soil that your food is grown in because if you're eating vegetables and you're not paying attention to the soil and making sure that you're actively putting like 60 different minerals into the soil, you're not going to get them. And you might have trouble with lectins and phytates and other plant defense molecules that will bind to the minerals and carry them out of your body. So it's really important to know that you might have trouble with lectins and minerals if you've got a high lectin diet. You might eat a lot of minerals or take mineral supplements and they don't work because you just poop them right out. The minerals stick to the lectins and they go out through your stool and it's gone. When you're eating for mental health, you want to try to eat foods that have high minerals in them, that you've paid attention to the sourcing of the soil for those plants. What I really like to do is I like to make soup out of bones. I like to use beef bones. I like to use soup stock out of shrimp shells. You can make them out of fish bones and fish. You can make them out of chicken, whole chickens, including the bone. So it's very useful to try to make a soup stock that's made out of very healthy organic animals if you're making soup. You want to take things like magnesium malate and to eat magnesium malate if you can get a source of magnesium malate from a supplement. Many people will also do well with D-ribose supplements. D-ribose is a supplement that is used to help with energy. D-ribose is used in people that are highly fatigued. And there's no such thing as a deficiency of D-ribose because we can all make D-ribose, but we don't sometimes. And the reason we don't make it is because we have a problem with something in biochemistry called the pentose phosphate shunt, or the pentose phosphate pathway, which is a part of biochemistry that has to do with how we burn glucose and sugar. And some people don't do that very well, so it's used a lot in cardiac patients, and it's used a lot in brain patients. In fact, one of my favorite authors, Dr. Stephen Sinatra, has several books. He's a holistic cardiologist and talks about metabolic cardiology in his book, Metabolic Cardiology, as well as some of his other books. And he talks about D-ribose and L-carnitine and magnesium as extremely important supplements that are used for the brain and for the heart. And you can get these from animal foods. L-carnitine is in meat, and you'll find D-ribose and magnesium in animal-based products. So eating meat is very useful, but eating nose to tail is even more useful. If a person comes to me and says, "Doc, what kind of eating should I do for mental health?" I'll tell them, well, let's pick between ketogenic, carnivore-ish, and low carb, high fat. And you get to choose, because we don't really know which diet is going to be best for you. If you have a seizure disorder or you have some kind of a problem with epilepsy, then we tend to head toward ketogenic, and that means we're testing by poking the fingers or poking the toes and checking the blood at least twice a day to figure out if you're in ketosis. The carnivore diet doesn't necessarily test for ketosis, and neither does the low carb, high fat diets. The general concept with the ketogenic diet is that you're trying to stay ketogenic, but you're not necessarily eating all animal products. You're eating a lot more fat and maybe not more protein and maybe a lot of vegetables. And some people do well with that and some people don't. If you do a ketogenic diet for mental health to control seizure disorders, then you're going to have to make sure that you're using lots of omega-3s and not so much omega-6s, because you won't get the results you're looking for if you don't pay attention to the omega-3 and 6 ratio. That's a big problem for a lot of people that are technically ketogenic, but they're eating trashy oils and they're on a dirty keto diet. And they're eating trashy seed oils, which are still actually fats, and they count for fats in their diet, but they will mess up their blood sugar and they'll mess up their brain. It's really important to eat omega-3 fats from fish oils or from algae if you are trying to do a ketogenic diet for whatever reason. And if you're doing a carnivore diet, you're probably going to have very low carbs. Now, my version of carnivore is a little more like what Dr. Saladino does, which includes fruit for a lot of people. I have a number of patients who are not as active as some patients, and they find that there's a need for some carbs, and they don't have seizure disorders, and they do better with some carbs. They find that they have big problems switching over, and the transition from a low-carb diet to a carnivore diet, which is almost no carbs, and no vegetables, takes a long time. It takes a long time to fat adapt. It takes a long time to get rid of all the lectins that are in the diet from the plant-based foods. And it takes a long time to learn how to burn fat efficiently. And to become fat adapted, it takes even Olympic athletes sometimes 12 weeks or longer. So I try to make this transition slow and gentle, and I try to explain to people that it takes a while for your body to learn how to change, and it takes a while to get rid of all those lectins. So I tell people, kind of start by nudging yourself into a low-carb, high-fat diet, then move more toward a keto-type diet, then move more toward a carnivore-ish diet. And there will be some people, like I really like Dr. Chafee's channel on YouTube, but he's a real purist for animal only and really not having the sugar from fruits. And I think there are people that need that too, but we don't know before we start. So what I don't want you to do is marry yourself to an idea that you read in a book or an argument that you heard on YouTube and pick that instead of trying it on yourself and measuring your blood markers and seeing what's good for you. So what do you eat for mental health? I think that raw and plant-based diets have caused a lot of problems for a lot of my patients, but some people do okay. Chinese medicine has always said that you need a mixture between raw and cooked food, and they lean more toward cooked plant foods and cooked vegetables and cooked, foods of all types. The Chinese medicine system is not into just raw food eating. There are times and places that raw food can be really good, and in some cancers and in some other conditions, raw food eating can be really good. But there are people that can't handle the uncooked lectins, because cooking and food processing and heating and acidification and pressure cooking, all these things change the proteins, which are the lectins in plants, especially vegetables, and beans and grains and nuts and seeds, and weaken them and make them less active. Not completely less active. Even sprouting helps, but you can't say that they destroy the lectins completely. So you may not be able to find that you tolerate a raw diet. I don't do very well on raw food diets for very long. I can eat raw food for a couple of days and then my digestion goes crazy. And there's a lot of people that can't handle a purely raw diet. There is something to be said for trying any diet for a period of time. That means a few weeks, maybe sometimes 2 weeks, sometimes 14 weeks. I've said on other episodes that lectins take many weeks to get rid of. So sometimes a person really needs to try a lectin-free diet for like 3 months before they really get enough of the lectins to come out of their body. So a person would enjoy going to a website. Ruled.me is one of the many websites that have keto calculators. And these keto calculators are ways of putting in your information about your target diet. So if you want to be in a ketogenic diet and you don't know how to calculate how many grams of protein, fat, and carbs I should get for my desired weight, because there are many ketogenic diets. There are at least 3 types, right? There's the kind that are for people that want to lose weight. There's the kind for people that want to bodybuild and gain muscle. And there's the kind for people that really don't want to change their weight. They're just doing it for, say, cancer, or they're doing it for seizure disorders, or they're doing it for some other purpose. And so you need to have a calculator that allows you to choose on the spectrum, what kind of keto goals do I have for my body composition? So Ruled.me allows you to put in, and many others allow you to put in your weight and your height and your sex and your age and your activity level and your body fat percentage, which is really important. So that's necessary to figure out what your grams and percentage of protein, fat, and carbs, which is called your macros, will be for your diet for mental health. We want to make sure that we're looking at that, and we want to make sure that we are making sure that if we do any kind of low-carb diet on the spectrum that I like, that we're making sure we get enough salt and magnesium. Sodium and magnesium are incredibly important, and even zinc, because as a person begins to purge all these lectins, their electrolytes are really going to change, and they're going to get achy muscles, they're going to get electrolyte changes, they're going to get weakness sometimes, and spasms sometimes, and muscle spasms, and sometimes weakness. And they may have problems with their potassium and their, not life-threatening problems, but just balance problems of balancing their potassium and their calcium and their sodium. And they're going to need about twice as much sodium as typical a person that is not on a low-carb diet. So they need to talk with their doctor about their blood pressure, about their plaques in their arteries, about whether they have a heart condition. So you don't want to just run off and do this stuff without consideration. So think about it and talk to your healthcare provider about whether you should increase your salt or not. Most people that are doing these kinds of diets are going to need to double their salt intake to have normal bowel movements and not have constipation, because you're not eating fiber on a lot of these diets. Now, the ketogenic diet may be full of fiber, and the low-carb, high-fat diet may be full of fiber, but there's not much fiber in the carnivore diet unless you're eating a large amount of fruit, which will have pectin, and that's a fiber in fruit. And that will drive the bowels. Now, I'm not a big fan of fiber. I think fiber causes more trouble than it's worth. But in any case, what I want to end on with you is that processed foods are the big enemy. In my mind, processed foods have got to go. Excitotoxins have got to go. So that's artificial colors, flavors, preservatives. If it's got a long name and you can't read it, or there's more than 5 ingredients, or there's chemical names you don't understand, or the ingredients list is a paragraph instead of a couple of lines, don't buy it. Don't eat it. Robert Lustig says if it has a label, don't eat it. That's pretty cool, but it's inconvenient. There are some things that we eat for convenience, and I understand that it's a trade-off. So what I don't want to do is, I don't want to tell you that you can't have better mental health, but I do want to tell you that you might have to work hard for it. You might find that you make some compromises and they're not enough for your mental health. You might find that you eat a little bit better and it's not enough, and you have to go harder. You have to work harder, and you have to be more restrictive in your diet before you can open up your diet and try new things, because you've got to purge all those lectins and all those problems out of your body before you can try new foods. So people will find that they have to go through this bottleneck of eating very restricted diet for a number of weeks or months before they can emerge and start trying other foods. But I do want you to try your own diet and find out what is the optimal diet for you. Don't just follow a book or a guru or a YouTuber. Find out what is your diet by trying these things and measuring your labs and measuring your blood sugar and seeing how you feel and tracking your symptoms and measuring your girth around your abdomen and measuring your arms and measuring your chest and your bust and your waist measuring your neck, and you'll see that you'll lose weight and you'll gain weight. You'll lose inches and gain inches with or without your weight changing. Your body fat will change, and sometimes your weight won't change. So you need to balance all these things and figure out what works for you by trying it. So if you'd like more details and more hand-holding and spoon feeding, please come over to our website and look at your options also to talk with me if you like.